Ventura County moved into the next tier of the state's reopening plan this week, meaning that many businesses can now reopen indoors with modifications, including places of worship.
It's the first time since March that church doors will be open for indoor services.
I knew that the mornings were getting very cold outside, and so that made a natural transition yesterday morning to having the Mass indoors.
It comes after Ventura County announced it was moving into the next red tier of the state's reopening plan. Places of worship can now reopen indoors at 25% capacity or 100 people, whichever is less. Over in Oxnard at Gold Coast Christian Church, administrators are busy rearranging furniture to welcome people inside this Sunday.
Yeah, it's exciting. The Holy Spirit, when he's landing on you in your living room, it's okay. But when he's with you and everybody else that's around you, it's like mind-blowing.
Hey, Tim Frisch with A Frisch Perspective here. I've been covering different churches out in California that have continued to meet indoors in spite of government restrictions. And one of those churches is Pastor Rob McCoy of Godspeak Calvary Chapel in Ventura County. So I thought this news story was really interesting, and thank you to Dave Carter, one of my listeners, who brought this to my attention, that Ventura County is actually loosening their restrictions right now, which you saw a little bit in that news report. And here is the website report here. Places of worship in Ventura County ready to resume indoor services. Places of worship are now allowed to reopen indoors in Ventura County since the county moved into the less restrictive red tier of the state's reopening plan this week. The state has allowed Ventura County to reopen indoors at 25% capacity or 100 people, whichever is fewer. So this is really kind of good news for churches. Again, in some places, the restrictions aren't that tight, but in some places, they're very tight restrictions. And so we see out in Ventura County, they haven't been able to meet indoors, I think, since March. So that's a long time that they haven't been able to meet indoors at all. And now the county is saying you can meet indoors, although in a limited capacity. It's interesting here, too. They're saying 25% capacity or 100 people in the building, whichever is fewer. Now, I'm imagining for smaller churches that might be okay, but if you're a bigger church, I'm thinking about what happened with Mark Dever's church out in Washington, D.C. I think it was the same restriction here. Meeting indoors at a max of 100 people in a really large building is still not going to satisfy a lot of ministries if they're really bigger ministries. They might be able to hold thousands of people, and they're only, according to this, allowed to have 100 people in their building. Another interesting thing here, though, is the timing of it, that right now, as it's going to be starting to get colder, the county has loosened restrictions. Now, I'm sure the county would say it has to do with the numbers, the stats of the virus right now. I'm not sure all of their thinking that goes into this, so I'm sure they would say it's the stats. However, it being colder is definitely a factor for churches, and so it's good to see that as it's getting colder, they're going to be able to meet indoors. Although this is California, I don't have as much sympathy for you about the cold as I do here in New Hampshire. Today, when I woke up, it was about 33 degrees, I think. It was actually some frost on my car. So I'm not sure it's that cold yet where they are, but still, it's going to be getting cold. And so it's good that churches are able to meet indoors. So I think it's fascinating that the government is making this decision right at this time. Is it just the numbers? Is it also the weather? I'm not really sure. The other thing is that I've been saying that these churches that are going to court over the issue, that it's very likely the restrictions will be looser if they continue to go to court and things aren't hashed out in a timely manner. And so if this continues on the way it's going right now, a church like Grace Community Church might actually not have an issue by the time the court case actually comes to a full decision. There might be a lot less restrictions by then. The fact that Ventura County is already starting to loosen their restrictions, I think, is a good sign. So we'll see what ultimately happens. I just wanted to bring this to your attention because I thought it was really interesting. It certainly impacts a ministry like Godspeak Calvary Chapel, and it will be interesting to see how these developments impact their particular court case. I'd like to hear what you think about all of this in the comments below, but thank you as always for listening to this report and some of my thoughts brought to you from A Frisch Perspective.